My suspicion is that not all of the council microphones are going to the system. That, like, we're picking up off of Jennifer's laptop.
Do you want mine back
No,
on?
they sound good in here, but not on YouTube. Well, I don't believe that because when she was talking at the last meeting, I could hear her plain as day, but I had mine here and I couldn't hear it.
I naturally talk loud because I'm used to having to talk loud.
My suspicion is that we're picking up off of Jennifer's laptop and not into the system. That's what I'm hoping they continue. No, that's for them to deal with.
How are you?
Good, how about you?
Good.
That's good.
Home with kids. Someone's gonna watch him. He said he was going to. No. He hasn't started anything yet. But he hasn't been drinking as much either. So he hasn't been
Front row.
drinking as much either. So he's toned that down. See? It'll help.
All right, there it is. I've got 6 o'clock. I'll call our meeting to order. Thank you for coming out tonight for our special council meeting. We've got a couple items on the agenda, and so we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'd all like to stand with us. Carrie, if you'll read the roll call tonight.
Mr. Steinberg? Here. Mrs. Rourke?
Here.
Mr. White?
Here.
Mayor Arthur?
Here. We just have 2 items on the agenda tonight. I don't know if we have any other modifications to our agenda.
Yes, if possible, Mayor and City Council, our engineer Brian Sarf would like to also discuss lighting options for the CASA 27 reconstruction project.
What kind of options?
Street lighting options.
Okay. All right, then I'll look for a motion to approve tonight's special meeting agenda with the addition of lighting for CASA 27.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. So we'll get started. We have received a draft copy of the special benefits analysis. So Jennifer, I'm going to turn this over to you and Brian, and we'll kind of walk through this.
All right. Mayor and City Council, Brian is going to run through the special benefit analysis consultation report, which was received today. Following this evening's meeting, the report will be available for public inspection. And we should also discuss this evening if the City Council would like the report posted on the website for ease of access for the public following tonight's meeting. So I think with that, I'll just turn over to Engineer Brian Sarf and let him just kind of start walking through the report.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thanks for having me. So just wanted to kind of do a high-level overview of the report that we just received. Just to kind of go through some of the basic items and interpretations here. So the consultant, they looked at several different types of properties along the project, and they kind of grouped them into a few groups. We've got our typical residential properties, we've got multifamily properties, kind of a non-residential, which was kind of commercial type properties. We had a couple of properties that are agricultural, but they're prime for development. And then a couple of miscellaneous oddballs that didn't really fit necessarily in terms of the calculation of benefit. So as we look at residential properties, as we look at residential properties, there was a thorough analysis done of several communities looking at before and after construction projects. I won't go into the nitty-gritty. I'm not the expert per se, but if you look in your report, you will see kind of the breakdown of how that was calculated. So those were calculated on really a per each parcel basis, and the summary of the report for residential properties was $7,500 to $8,000 of benefit received. And if you're looking at your map, that is those yellow parcels that are highlighted. As we look at multifamily, there's a number of multifamily parcels along the project. It's essentially a per unit type of calculation that they came up with. However, the per unit calculation decreases as the amount of units increase. I'll just make that note. So if you were to divide the number of units per the benefit, you wouldn't get the exact same number across. So a 12 unit apartment would generally have a lower cost per unit, if that makes any sense. And as we move on to the non-residential commercial properties, those are really kind of looked at individually in terms of how they received benefit. There's a couple of agricultural parcels on the south side of the project, and that was really an evaluation of development potential in terms of residential lots. And again, that is highly detailed in your report if you were to look at that section. And then there's a kind of our oddballs, a couple of city parcels in there that are just kind of vacant properties, as well as one property on the south that's large enough to be split into two separate residential parcels. That's kind of an overview of how they came to that. The values, benefit values are on your map. I know that's pretty tiny, but it's also summarized in the table that was provided in the report. A couple of items I wanted to highlight, a couple scenarios. There are some parcels that have common ownership that are adjacent to each other that function as one parcel. Essentially, a small parcel attached, although it's two separate parcels, you typically would not look at that as two residential properties. That actually gets treated as one residential property. So the report essentially finds that those few scenarios, it looks like there's about 4 of those scenarios out there, kind of indicated by a dark black line. Those would get one residential assessment according to the report. Conversely, there's also some common ownership parcels that function as multiple parcels. So even though a singular owner might own 2 adjacent parcels, some of those did still function as 2 separate parcels, therefore they would receive 2 separate assessments. One thing the report did not go into, and this really comes down to policy, but something the city council should consider is how to handle corner lots. I think that gets handled a number of different ways. For example, I have done projects before where a corner lot might get half of the assessment in thought that when they come to do the side street, they would get the other half of the assessment at that time. So again, something that the council will need to consider as we look at corner lots. There is one lot that has multiple fronts, and this is the Fromm property that fronts both Agency Street and Second Avenue, Second Street, I should say. And again, it kind of comes down to a policy decision on how we want to take care of that. So there was an assessment levied against this particular parcel back in 2010. So I've seen it where they offer, a credit if it was a small assessment or something like along those lines. Another type of property would be undevelopable lots. And that doesn't show up separately on your map, but there might be properties that are shown as a residential property, but it could be determined that they could not put an improvement on due to bluff setbacks, other setbacks, other challenges, soil conditions such as that. And that would be something that the council would have to take into consideration. So I just ran a few quick calculations based on purely the benefit analysis and using the ranges provided. The approximate range assessed would be about $617,000 to $665,000. Again, that's $617,000 to $665,000 for the project. And if we look at the project as a whole, that's approximately 21 to 23% of the project, and that includes the county portion. Just as kind of a comparison, I think recent projects have been right around that 20 to 25% is typically where they've landed. There's a number of agricultural parcels and commercial parcels on this particular analysis that I think is driving that percentage up a little bit. I think if you were to take those out and look at, say, residential properties alone, I think that percentage would go down significantly. So that's my overview. It's a larger detailed report, well done, I would say. But at this time, I guess I would open it up for questions from the council.
In your experience, Brian, have you worked with similar reports?
Yes, I've worked with a report that was done by this consultant. That was a project that was let in 2017.
Does the council have any questions in regard to the findings? I think the key, and the key for those here is going to be on this table at the beginning and our map here. I just had one question in regard to a parcel from the map
Yep.
that you've got. And I think this may be Hanson's agricultural parcel here,
Correct.
but it's bounded by a residential parcel prior to the street. Is that the case? Or, I mean, I guess I don't know and maybe you don't know, but
That is correct, and that's a great question. It is common ownership. It's a little bit tough to see on this map, but it's essentially functioning as a single parcel. And I would say, venture that that's kind of what she was looking at there, but they are two distinct land uses. I think if you look at the table, it essentially is a summation of a residential assessment plus another evaluation that, as I looked at it, was really comparable to the Foley property to the south, just on a smaller scale. I think that would be probably a worthwhile question to Sherry, though, and just verify the methodology there.
any questions from the public that are here seeing this?
General question?
Yep.
What is the advantage? What is going to increase my property? I own this over here. Put water, now when I go to buy a house, first thing I ask them, how's the water line? How is the sewer line? Oh, beautiful street. I don't care about that at all. I care about the house. Now, where is this going to increase the value of my property?
So
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. The fact is, you're narrowing up the road, limiting the parking. What's the advantage? Tell me how it increases the value of my property.
that's exactly what this report does. It looks at dozens and dozens of properties right before
That you can't
And-
develop, that you can't build on, that you can't do anything with.
undevelopable. That's, again, a separate issue that we did address here. Looking at residential properties, again, they did a detailed analysis of several properties directly before and directly after projects.
Different scenario, different land. If you're doing it in town, one of these city streets here, you may increase the value. My properties along there, you can't do anything but what's on them right now. See that slough back there? That's wetland. You can't develop back there, you can't go back there, you can't build. I've got one property there that they tell me they just increased the value from $7,000 to $20,000 because it's a buildable lot. With the setbacks and everything else, I may be able to put it on a damn two-stall garage on it. That's a buildable lot. The water, is this water going, my water's yellow. It's gonna be yellow when they're done. You need a filtration system, so why am I,
have broken water pipes that we need to replace. I mean, that's the impetus of the entire project.
How many times has that water line broken in the last 10 years?
I think we talked about 5 times approximately last time, in the last 10 years.
It doesn't increase the value of my property at all.
Well, it certainly would decrease if the water doesn't work.
No, it wouldn't. I just turned my damn well on.
All right.
I mean, this is crazy. This doesn't increase the value of any of those properties. Not any of the residential properties along there.
I'm gonna have to, defer to the report done by the professional that,
I'll bet you got a college degree too.
Any other questions? All right, Jennifer, next steps.
So I think this evening, the point of the meeting was to review the report from Sherry, look at the information after she's done her work and the probable benefit to properties from this project. And the next step is the city engineer and I will be working together to put together a proposed assessment role. There'll be more discussion at the upcoming meeting, but we can have something put together based on if you're comfortable with the information in this report. And then after that, we would schedule a public hearing for the special assessment hearing for the June 7th meeting, I believe. So all property owners that are affected by the property would receive notice, and they would, in the notice would include the proposed special assessment, and they'd have an opportunity to come to the public hearing and, voice their opposition to that. So I think those are our next steps.
Dates
And-
on those?
Yep, okay, so the next, I believe it is, just one second, I'll pull up my notes here. So we'd be looking at a June 7th city council meeting for the public hearing, and then the next meeting, regular city council meeting where we'd call for that special meeting is the May 3rd city council meeting. So that would be on Monday. And then we would have to mail notice no later than 2 weeks in advance of the June 7th assessment hearing to all affected properties. And then we'd include information about the proposed assessment amount and the opportunity to express concerns about the actual assessment at the assessment hearing.
All right, and then you had a question as well, Jennifer, about posting to the website.
Yes, I did confirm with legal counsel. It's acceptable if the council is okay with going ahead and posting this to the website, simply because of the number of affected properties and the burden of them having to contact City Hall, me email it out. So this would just be more ease of access, if you will.
Do we know when we'll be getting a final version?
So it sounds like the final is when the city indicates that there's no changes, and I emailed the consultant to ask about that, and she said they finalized the report at the client's request, and they can issue a final report if the council finds no errors or anything concerning in the report, and if you're okay with it, they can issue a final report, I guess, title, if you will.
So if we were to post the draft version and then residents can kind of take a look and see if there are questions that come up,
Sure.
what would be the process to address questions? So Bob said he's got undevelopable property. How does that question get resolved?
I don't know if that's a question that the city can answer. I know we were contacted by Blue Earth County about your parcel, Bob. There was one of them. Yeah. Well, I know, they contacted the city to ask if, according to our zoning, all of our determination is gonna be is according to our zoning code. Is it a buildable lot based on size? Nothing else. We don't look at soil conditions. That's not our realm. So that's where I wonder if maybe you need to hire somebody that can go in and test the soils, determine if it's.
Soil condition. You go down there, half of that property is over the
I don't know.
bank from the slough.
The city doesn't determine if a lot is buildable or not. We
But
just
is
look at the
there-
zoning.
Which parcel are we talking about?
We're talking just north of my garage.
Okay.
The house there. There's a gravel area there, where I park my vehicles, that area, that lot there.
just south of Maywood, I think.
That's all filled with wood chips and brush and stuff like that. Fact is, right now I'm out there bringing the level back up because it's settled again over the winter. You can't build on it unless you put in 20-foot pylons.
So that can almost be considered one of those properties where they're tied together?
Well, I think they did tie them together or else my taxes would have been higher.
Well, from this, what I'm seeing, right, that might be a whole different thing, but what I'm seeing, she's got two separate parcels here, and it hasn't indicated them as a common ownership parcel tying them together.
They are listed as two separate parcels.
That doesn't matter, I guess.
Right.
They could still be tied together if you're using the one for parking.
Up until this year, it was $7,500 is what it was assessed at.
Right.
This year, it's $20,000.
Mayor Orringer, the double black line would signify that there are two parcels under one owner.
Right, yeah, and we've got several of those along the corridor, but this particular one is not shown as that, so I think that's what we'll investigate and ask, and, because then it would tie that to your home parcel. So then it would be one parcel, in the sense of this report, from how I understand it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So I just want to know what kind of a mechanism that we can get to bring any questions that might come up. We're all kind of seeing this firsthand here now, so we've got to have a chance to read through it and process it and see if there's any questions. So what's the
I guess I would
process
see
to
it
get
no
to
different
Sherry?
than any other, time there's information at council meeting. If somebody has a question, they can just contact City Hall unless you want me to send out a communication to the list of affected properties. I could do that and let them know the report's available, but I don't know if that's a typical process when you do a special benefit analysis and you get the consultation report, if everybody that is affected by the project studies it, and, I don't know what the process is. Maybe Brian has some experience when he worked in another city.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could call it typical, but I think we are in a scenario where this thing is kind of coming in at 11th hour, that the extra communication probably wouldn't hurt. In the special assessment process, that is built in to a certain extent where, at the next meeting, we essentially declare the amount that we're going to assess, and we send notice to residents, so it is built in there, but I think the little bit of extra time, it's not much, frankly, but would not be a bad idea.
Certainly. Yes.
I was just wondering, the public hearing is when? Did you say June 7th?
Yes.
So if you put something on the webpage, could you say that you need the public hearings on June 7th? If somebody has a concern or a question, that you need it by a certain date? Before they can, or can they speak freely on June 7th at the public hearing?
Oh, yeah, most certainly they can speak at the public hearing, but
Right,
But to get any questions from reviewing the report, hey, this is how my property is affected.
could you set it by a certain date?
Yep. And I'm thinking by that May 3rd date, would be the appropriate time, so. Because she needs to,
Also, just to let you know, I did send out an update on April 21st to the affected properties, just kind of letting them know what was going on with the consultation report, when we were going to be receiving it at tonight's meeting. I did get a few phone calls from residents asking if they should come to the meeting or what was going to be discussed, and and it also outlined in there too that the cost to be assessed would be declared at the May 3rd meeting, and then notice would be sent out before the June 7th meeting. So there's been some communication with residents about the process, but we sure could send out something additional.
well, I think it's imperative that we get it onto the website and maybe make everyone aware that that's there for review. I don't know if there's any objections from the rest of the council. And then we would put onus back on property owners to take a look through that, as we will as well. to see if there's any questions that we turn up in the meantime that we can address prior to the assessment hearing. So Brian will be preparing a assessment roll, which will look somewhat similar to the table in here. It would be each property and that proposed assessment amount. And then that's what we'll discuss on June 7th.
Correct, yep. Usually that, you call it the final assessment roll, but that gets mailed out with, either that or the amount gets mailed out with the notice. And after the hearing is closed, the city council can amend that roll as necessary.
All right, any further questions? And let us know if you find anything else, Bob, and we'll do some looking if that parcel can be tied together to your house parcel.
Tax wise, I think it's,
Okay.
shows it's two separate parcels. I don't know.
There's a lot of unique situations on this roadway.
When I talked to one, they sent me here, and they talked to somebody back here.
Well, again, I mean,
They don't know.
we are, charged with making infrastructure improvements to the city. That's our duty as the council. This has been our policy, this assessment policy that we've had for decades and decades, and this is how we all participate. I know that it's not a fun process.
Should just be at some advantage to me. Tell you what, take some of the money, build a filtration system.
We've been looking at that, so that's,
Well, you should have done that first. I just saw it, orange water, I think I'm drinking orange juice in the morning.
I'm sorry to hear that. But, I mean, this is the process that we've got. I mean, the council, I think, as we looked at this early on, it's probably time to reassess the assessment policy of the city, just in how we do things. And so I think that's a discussion that this project has really kind of pushed along here as well, that it might be time. From what I'm seeing from the report's amounts, kind of hits the spot that in my gut, I was kind of feeling that a residential parcel probably would be in that $7,000 to $8,000 range, and that's kind of where this is shaken out. That's been, I don't know if we look historically, I think that's been kind of held true to what the council's done on past assessment projects, where we've had an amount, but the council has reduced it even further from what was on the policies, roll, or just because it doesn't help the residents. So, if I come in and say you've got a $50,000 assessment, that's a big blow. So, and we understand that. Unfortunately, most of the projects that we've done recently have been in the older portions of the city, where we've got infrastructure that's old and we've been trying to deal with it. But then you push that out to those that live on those streets, and it becomes a challenge. So I just hope that everyone knows that the council is understanding of where this puts everybody in, financially, and that's kind of what we're looking to do to balance the city's budget and how we finance these things. So I know you do.
Talk about where it hits you in the pocketbook.
Right. So, any other questions? Then if everyone will take a look, I don't know how quickly you'll have that posted tomorrow.
Yep, I can get it right away. I could probably even do it tonight, and then I can get the letter out in the mail tomorrow.
Okay, and council, as you're reviewing, if there's any questions that come up on our end, certainly forward those to Jennifer. What I'd like to do is get any of that to Brian, and it's Sherry, right?
Yes. Yep.
To Sherry for her final input into that, and then we'll kind of keep rolling with the 429 process, and so then we'll see an assessment roll coming out shortly then. Now, we'll jump in because it relates to this project. You have an update about lighting.
Yes,
on-
let me grab.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience.
Thank you.
So as requested, we did take a little closer look at lighting levels along Agency Street. Kind of a more data-driven approach rather than anecdotal. So we did the photometrics here. A couple of things I would say. So MnDOT does have some recommendations. They're not hard guidelines. Lighting can be a little bit subjective, but for what it's worth, I'll say this. Sidewalk lighting levels is what average lighting would be 0.3 foot candles in sidewalk, okay? That's a little bit abstract, I understand, but that's MnDOT's guidance, and that changes from city to city, but that's really the guidance we have. For streets, MnDOT is usually saying twice that, 0.6, when they're lighting their streets. So out there right now, we have lights on about every third wood pole along Agency Street. As we look at the existing lighting, we're at 0.2 foot candles in the sidewalk area. So we're not too far off. Certainly, what that number doesn't capture is the inconsistency. So you've got light spots and you've got dark spots. So as you look on the first sheet of the handout that I've provided here, that's illustrated pretty plainly there, where you've got light spots and dark spots. So that's really where we're at. What we did, and on the following page, for a possible proposed condition, just as a comparison, is we put a light fixture on each pole that's out there today, and that's what you're seeing in that second figure. It's the existing the existing fixtures are about 20 to 25 feet high. We'd be looking to add essentially 2 lights per every light that's out there right now. It's tough in this case. There's no real in-between. You can do 2 out of every 3 lights, but you're still going to get those light spots and the dark spots. That's certainly the city's option. But what we did for comparison was just to put a light fixture on each and every light. And the only place where we have a little bit of flexibility is Maywood to LeSueur. There is no pole out there right now. So to provide any light, we're going to have to ask Excel to add 1 or 2 poles on that block there. Right now, we're just showing 1. None of this is set in stone by any means, just a means to evaluate how to move forward. So looking at this second scenario, that brings us to 0.6 foot candles. So again, the recommendation, MnDOT, is 0.3. This is at 0.6. So we're over the threshold. Again, that's a little bit ambiguous, a little bit subjective. But I guess those are our basic options without completely investing in a city-owned lighting system that serves the sidewalk alone. That's really all I had to say about that, and open it up for any questions. I would say that from the public standpoint, this can be almost like sidewalk. Some people love it, some people hate it, so it might be good to get some public input on this before we would go ahead and add light to every pole necessarily. But as you can see from our analysis, it is still dark before you're hitting most of the faces of most of the houses there on the west side. So those are our findings. Was there any questions regarding the lighting calculations?
In your proposed lighting layout, is it possible for you to adjust, you know, the spacing of lights on the poles to come closer to that 0.3-foot candle range? You know, because what you've got shown, you said, was jumped up to 0.6.
Correct. That's correct. And again, that's an average, so that's fine. I guess in approximately 1/3, you're just gonna have dark spots in that. It just, so in that second map, I put a little star by each of the new lights. There's some cases where you could do every other pole, but most of them, it's, again, every third light right now. So we're kind of stuck with the spacing without having Excel adjust their whole distribution line, right? That becomes much more, that's a different scenario than what we've talked to this point. If you'd like, we can definitely run a scenario where we pick, we take about one light off every third pole and see what that lighting comes down to. You could probably visualize in your mind what it would look like doing that. You're just gonna have 2/3 light, 1/3 kind of dark. Is that something you'd like to see? Would that be worthwhile? I think it's a fairly quick calculation.
I think agency I've walked it at night, I think it's a pretty dark street.
I think we need to at least get lights on the corners, especially like Connie and there was one other one. Well, for sure Connie, and then that one corner of Linda, where pedestrians will cross, it needs to be fairly light just so people see them. So I think if we don't do lights on the whole thing, I think we at least need to look at the corners to brighten those corners up.
Sure.
Oh, okay, you mentioned the illumination for the sidewalk was 0.3, and it'd be twice that for the street. So are you illuminating the sidewalk only or sidewalk and street? There's your variance. And where the illumination would be on your second chart, that would be the illumination for the street.
Right.
So you look at both ways.
Yeah, and those are the big Cobra head fixtures out over the street. Yeah, and they'll bleed back onto the sidewalk. So it's street lighting, but we're trying to capture the sidewalk as well. So
Which that would be the better option over a street light because it's not going to face and go into their windows like the street lights would.
Right. Now, Brian, if we decide to do this, this is kind of something that Excel will do almost as a separate project to this.
That is
If
correct.
we wanted to add some additional lights, we can do that. We just add that to our monthly street lighting bill, and
That's my understanding. I think it's a fairly simple thing for them to do. It's really, in a way, not tied to the project
Right.
whatsoever. It's not part of the contract. There's really no rush to do anything, and I'm not sure if they would appreciate, well, can we add another one now and another one? There's maybe some of that to it, but certainly if we wanted to add a couple more down the road too, that would probably be a possibility.
well, I'd like to see a little bit, more lighting here. Obviously, your photometric chart kind of shows the dead zones currently, and then if we're adding sidewalk, now we've got kind of an issue that's not being covered. So I think we need some additional lighting. I think the question is, what's the optimal level? But I think we can work through that as we go through the project.
Sure.
And you'd have to find out when Excel would, how does it work into the construction of the project and what Excel would want to do. Maybe they want to have the project done before they would even do anything.
Yeah,
we'd have to find out what.
That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure. I don't think it has much bearing either way, to be honest. They are gonna be relocating some poles. When I say that, I'm talking about, 3 to 5 feet laterally to be out of sidewalk. So they are gonna be doing work immediately here.
Okay.
But in terms of the lighting, it seems like really a separate operation altogether. And little impact if it's done before or after the project.
So as the poles move laterally, that lighting moves away from the street lighting as well. There's less to the street, more on the sidewalk.
Correct, for a couple of those
So
lights.
you'll be reducing the lighting to the street unless you do add, but even then, that's gonna add more to the sidewalk instead of the street.
Right.
But if they're coming out and moving poles and we wanna add one, that'd be the time to add it. Add that one pole while they have their equipment out here, right? Or probably wouldn't matter either way you move that.
There's no upfront cost to adding
Okay.
these lights actually for the city at all.
So it wouldn't really matter from our standpoint.
From a cost standpoint, it won't matter. It's really just a monthly fee per each light.
It's just an LED lamp, Cobra lamp, connected to the wood pole, right?
That's correct.
Well, Jennifer, maybe if you and Brian want to have a meeting with Excel, kind of show them, this proposed option, and then we can kind of keep talking about it, see what they think of for scheduling, timing. If there's poles relocated in the project, does that affect, kind of what they're interested in? And are there any areas that we need additional pole? That would be kind of towards that LeSueur intersection a little bit, right?
Correct. Between Maywood and LeSueur, really, that's probably a good question. I mean, it's how many lights are you looking to add, right? There is certainly a little bit of a dead spot that we didn't consider north of LeSueur there. I'm not sure the city's appetite to look at that. Maybe that's there. To this point, the scope of work we presented was adding lights to the existing poles and adding 1 or 2 poles on this block. But we can clarify that.
Is North Agency ample lighting? I guess I haven't,
I wouldn't call it ample lighting, but we're essentially on all of the poles right now.
okay, we're on all the existing poles.
Correct. And it's not much better, if at all, than, map number 1 that you've got in front of you.
I'm not sure, I stepped out to get this on my computer. Did you guys talk about the cost per light? I don't know if that was a question that came up. I did look back in an email, and I think it was estimated about $10 a month per light on the existing poles if we would add additional light, just to give you guys an idea.
Yeah,
We
I
want to
think-
plug that into the budget, because it wouldn't, like you said, impact the project. It would just be into our street lighting costs that we budget annually.
That's correct.
Well, if the council has no objections, then I think we should at least get a meeting set up with Excel and, see about schedules and, are there any other flags or hurdles or anything that we need to
Sure,
cover through that?
makes sense.
All right, anything else on the Agency Street project? You have anything else, Brian?
I don't think so. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And then we'll move on to our second agenda item. And the council does have a vacancy on the council, and so we had put out the call to see if there are any interested parties in filling the vacant council seat, and we have 8 respondents. And so tonight we have to determine how we want to proceed with filling the vacancy. So you've got applications in front of you. I don't know what the best process is to move forward. Jennifer, I don't know if you have any guidance on any of that?
Sure, I'll do my best. Just to kind of review what's required in statute when you're filling vacancies. I mean, there is no necessarily prescribed way to go about selecting a candidate to fill the vacancy. However, it does state, though, that if there is a vacancy, it's declared, which you guys have done, and the vacancy was announced, the council chose to advertise for the vacancy and accept applications. We received 8 applications in, and from this point, it's up to the city council. If you want to review this evening, I did put together a draft score sheet. It's totally optional if you want to use it, kind of just aligning up the responses from the applicants in the questionnaire they submitted when they applied for the vacancy to what the city is looking for in a candidate. You could set up interviews. You could narrow it down to, the top 3 or 4 and do interviews. But ultimately, the vacancy will be filled by appointment by the council, and then if there's a tie, then the mayor would cast the deciding vote. So with that, I guess I'll turn it back to you and how you want to go about selecting the candidate.
Since there's only 4 of us left, there wouldn't be a tie potential available, so.
Good point.
No, I was very pleased with the backgrounds that each of the candidates provides, so some of you are here. Thank you, and it's pretty amazing that we've got that many people in town that have varied and unique experience that would be helpful on the council. Maybe it's time for the mayor to step down and get new blood on here. Is that, now we've got people coming through?
Jim, just takes 8 people to replace me, that's all.
So, council, you've got 8 options, and I guess I don't know how we want to proceed. I mean, again, looking through everything that's been presented to us, I thought we've got, a choice in front of us, that isn't easy. I think each of these people would provide value to the council in all sorts of different ways. So, thoughts, comments? Where do we go from here? You're all new to the council, right? So you're looking to me. No, kind of my thoughts were, I'd really like to see somebody that's been involved in some of our boards and committees. So we've got Park Board, we've got EDA, we've got Planning Commission, and we've got several candidates who have come from those areas. And so, in my opinion, not to discount any of the other candidates, I would look to somebody from one of our boards already kind of participating, in a monthly or quarterly way to the city. And so we've got Christine Black Hughes, Mike McCarty, and John Whittington, who have all served on some of our boards. And so my vote would be for one of those 3. Your comments? Questions?
What has been done in the past, Tim?
I think it's been varied, really, as far as what the process is. How do we go about?
I guess when was the last vacancy?
It was probably the mayorship. And I'm trying to remember the process.
Council appoint someone then, do you know? Or
We did not advertise, I don't recall, for
Right.
that position. I don't think, I'm not
You weren't,
100%.
and you weren't.
I was here, it was when I first started working, and I don't remember, but I feel like there was just an appointment made by the council. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. The council could just make a motion, appoint somebody. It doesn't even have to be anybody on this list. I mean, that's, the reality is you have that freedom to pick who you want.
In my time being on the council, which has been very, a little longer than Anthony and Beth's, but not much, I've noticed, certain people on this list that have attended meetings quite regularly. So that, leads me to mention Joel Raydell, who has attended a lot of meetings and knows a lot of information, and Leon has also attended a lot of meetings. Just that I'm not saying that that's who we should vote for, but I'm just saying that that's a point that I think is important, is that they've been at public meetings often. Until, we had to go to a virtual situation.
Well, and that's key, in any board as this, participation is the thing that makes these work, so the ability to be here, and all the candidates had mentioned that they would be available for the first Monday of the month, and there's other Mondays and things, special meetings, and sometimes those don't work with schedules, but I'm confident that everyone coming forward can meet those requirements. And
Well, I'd like to at least shrink this list to a number to where maybe we can sit down with each individual, whether it's 2, 3, get it down to a smaller number so maybe we can sit down and talk with them as a council.
sure.
Is that something that's been done before, or?
Yeah, I think that used to be kind of the way that we did some of the appointments to our boards and commissions. I don't know, John, do you remember being interviewed?
No, not at the,
Christine, do you remember being interviewed?
pardon?
Do you remember being interviewed for a position on the EDA?
Yes, I was interviewed by the old city manager,
Okay,
but not by you all.
right.
So I'm assuming he brought the information back to you, but I wasn't.
Yes, yep. So I think that's an appropriate method if we can, whittle down our list to, 2 or 3 that we want to interview.
Well, I'd just like to get to know them a little more.
Right.
To be honest with you, I know a couple of them, but not very many of them.
I would agree with Anthony. I think that's where I was starting to struggle is, on paper, everybody looked fantastic.
Yeah, I mean-
But paper and what is really gonna happen can be 2 different things. And then we're supposed to be making that vote on behalf of the city on who that person's gonna be. So I was able to narrow it down some, and then you get to a certain point, you're like, okay, now what?
So then, should we proceed with each council member using the scorecard we've got to come up with our top 3 candidates, and then move into an interview process with those top 3? And
I like that.
Yep, I would agree. How soon is this happening?
sooner the better. Jennifer, I don't know what you think if each of the council members takes home the score sheet
Sure.
and the applications, comes up with their scoring level, kind of marking their top 3 and sending that to you, and you can compile who those top 3
Yep.
are.
That's totally fine, and then for accountability, I can keep, everybody's, so that everybody can see, verify that what I'm picking as the top 3 represents your choices, absolutely. Yep, you can do that.
We should probably have this done by Friday, or are you thinking sooner, or?
I would like to see it, yeah, I mean, if we can do it by Friday, that
Yeah, I
would be a
think-
great target.
yeah.
And, because then we could even, do we want to call a special meeting, or would that be a closed meeting, kind of an interview type of a situation?
That's a great question. That's come up a couple times. There's no legal basis to go into closed session to do an interview. That's a really common question, so it would have to be done in the open session. You could do either a special meeting like you're saying, or you could schedule, 5:30, 5 o'clock before the regular council meeting. That's an option as well.
Okay.
Would we be inclined to wanting to do this before Friday, so then the person could be at the meeting on Monday? Or would we interview on Monday?
We'd have to provide special, are you saying that the person then would be interviewed prior to Monday's meeting?
Yeah,
We'd have to provide special notice for a meeting, so it might be best,
to just do the Friday thing.
I think what the mayor was saying, and then just knowing in advance that you're gonna have, when you're gonna do the interviews, if it's gonna be at 5 o'clock on Monday, or.
Are we able to do it
you know,
5
a
o'clock
new
Monday?
one.
Because we're already here. I mean, Monday would make sense.
Yeah, we could just start the meeting earlier if the mayor's okay with doing that.
And that way we could potentially have a vote and appoint
Yep.
someone prior to the meeting?
Yep.
Okay. All right, any other questions then in regard to filling this vacancy? Then Jennifer, if you'll send out to the council a reminder to provide you with a filled-out score sheet by Friday.
Will do.
And sooner if you get at it, if you have all 4 of our responses, you know, if that helps out for scheduling, you know, I'd like to give the candidates as much time to be prepared.
Yep.
You know, if Monday doesn't work, if there's some other, you know, time frame that we have to look at, but.
Sounds good.
Mayor, is Jennifer going to have a list of general questions to ask? Are we coming Monday with questions to ask, or combination of both?
We have had kind of typical questions that we have used in interviews, and I don't know if, Jennifer, you might still have that on.
I'm sure I could find it, and I could put together some draft
Yeah.
questions, send it to you, and then you guys review, and if you have any suggested changes, we could get that all in place before Monday's meeting.
Those would be probably more typical to employment,
Right.
you know, rather than council members, so
Yep.
they would have to be modified probably slightly. All right. Any other questions in regard to filling the vacancy? Questions from some of you that are involved? Any concerns or questions?
I have a question about open meetings. Are you allowed to change the time without giving a 2-week notice to the public?
I'm not aware of anything about a 2-week notice. We're within reasonable time to provide notice. You have to have a 3-day notice for a city council meeting. We would just make sure we posted notice. We could call it a special work session, and then the regular meeting is scheduled to start at 6 o'clock. So
Right.
we'll just make sure that everybody is aware of that and send out notice.
All right. Anything else? Then I will look for a motion to adjourn.
All motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Thank you all for coming out, and residents on agency, make sure that we take a look at the report. Any questions that come up, let Jennifer know. The council, the same instructions, go through the report, see if there's any questions that come up in the meantime. Thank you.